my background has not been linear by any means, and I think as a business owner, that's often the case. People, get drawn to certain things. But my background, I started out as a front end engineer and a designer, I guess by trade, and that's how I got into technology to start with. But really, was the entrepreneurial side. For one of my first, I guess, ventures was an esports startup, an esports company. And I was working with my brother and a couple friends, and we were that classic young entrepreneur that I would say we didn't have it all figured out. Maybe the best way to describe it, we were all builders. We were all people that were creators, and let's make something and let's make it better and let's make it better. We were not salespeople. We were not financial people, and just going for it. Kind of having that fearlessness of like, let's take a risk, let's go. And it was an amazing experience to sort of help forge so much that I have become. But that part of it was also very eye-opening. I mean, we didn't know the stuff that makes a business actually successful. We knew how to make products. And even then, I don't know if we did either, right? But so from there, that kind of was the kickstart to that entrepreneurial journey for me. And I said, I want to get better at this. So I worked at a small agency called the Plumtree Group based out of Chicago. And that's where I actually first met you.
Say we in fact did work together.
Yes. Yeah. And that was just a world-class time of my life because I learned so much, and everything sort of came together. I remember thinking about getting an MBA and exploring, is that good for me? Because I needed more knowledge on, how do businesses work? How do businesses grow? And I opted out to go like, well, put me into a small company. Let's just see what happens. And it was the best decision I ever made because I just got exposed to everything. I was hired as a designer and a front-end developer, and really quickly you're like, well, we need this, or let's build this, and you just start, leveling up on all these different buckets, and grew that company, played many roles in that company, and most importantly, learned that software development lifecycle just backwards and forward, and it was agnostic. So the owner of that company. One of the things he taught me a lot of things, but one of the things he really taught me was it's not like, there's a universal lesson in things and there's a very specific granular lesson. And so we'd be like learning a tool, for example, or some framework or whatever. And he would kind of level, us up and be like, guys, remember, this is not about, this e-commerce tool. It's about e-commerce. And it was so true. It's like, there's these universal things that apply not just once. And that has been key to growing companies, is that you have to sort of be a granular, but then you have to also understand the magnitude of what it actually means. And so anyways, I stepped down from there and started Vault, my company now. So a long way of introducing my company now, but Vault Innovation, we build software for companies to specifically help them grow. So, very hardcore tech-based focus. So, AI, mobile apps, web apps, but the goal is to make companies grow with that technology. So the two most common scenarios are to build a new product that creates a new revenue stream. So startups, we work with a lot of startups, or existing companies that are just doing something different. Hey, I got a new opportunity, I want to build it. And then the other one is just using tools to make that product better, that service better. So, we'll do a lot of like customer facing portals, customization and personalization of experiences, so it converts better, and then of course like workflow automation, that type of stuff. But it's fun. Every day is a new day. Technology is awesome.
That is awesome. So I can definitely relate to kind of your path to where you got here. Today's about you, not me, so I won't reflect and regurgitate a lot of the same. But it's interesting how much you learn in the different experiences that you weren't necessarily expecting to, that kind of leads you to find who you are and what you do, and kind of take that risk.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So with Vault, and you talked about getting into workflows and things like that. If someone's to say, what type of problems do you solve? Another version of that, maybe more boring, is what are your services? But yeah, I like to look at it from a problem.
And it's software it can be pretty agnostic. It's a pretty wide range of things. So we've touched, almost every vertical I can think of. But I would say that the main thing we focus on is B2B services and service-based companies. So companies that are providing services where there's a lot of touch points with their clients, I would say the main thing is kind of customer experience. And I don't want to say buzzwords, but what are your clients' problems that they have? And an example I would just say, I think is one that people may understand. Is like Domino's Pizza delivery, right? They made that status of the pizza delivery tool,
Mhm.
and it was this just really straightforward, kind of silly thing in a way, and it was just earth shattering to their business, number one, but also to the customer. Like, I know where my pizza is, and I know they're making it,
Yeah.
and that sort of transparency is a big problem we solve with technology. You allow things to be self-serve for customers. You allow them to do things yourself, but also you allow them to see inside of what's happening. So that's a huge use case, is giving a business's customers more transparency on the process you're doing. Because service-based companies, are usually not one-off things. They have clients for a long time. So those touch points are many. So it's making those touch points smoother and better for customers. So I know that's super granular, but I could go through more examples. But it's
Yeah.
it's really making customers more comfortable with your service.
Well, that's interesting because and some of the questions asked led to some overviews of service and solving problems and automation and that sort of thing. If you're comfortable without saying a client name, what might be an example? So Domino's Pizza, we've all heard of it, we
Yeah.
all understand it. What would be a unique example to give us a little bit of insights into what's Vault working on right now, or a fun story to tell in the context of that type of solutioning?
Oh yeah, the stories to tell of building software. Whole lot of stuff to talk about that. But no, some cool stuff we're working on right now. We're working on a medical record retrieval product, and so the service is very, honestly pretty straightforward. An attorney or an insurance company needs a medical record to basically look through the evidence to process a claim or to process a lawsuit. So there's a very formal process to get that record retrieval. So by kind of like level one, you simply go, whoa, what record do I need to get? Okay, let me contact the hospital. Let me pay the hospital for that record. When the record sends it to me, I have to, what they call is, bait stamp it or make it like a formal document.
Mhm.
Um, that stuff can be done in a human form, and it has been for many years. We went in here and said, okay, how can we make this faster so that the turnaround time of that record is best in class, and so best in industry. And so we built a portal to intake those requests really simply. And again, that's not rocket science, but it just wasn't in the industry. So the intake of the request of the order is really simple now and comprehensive. And then when that process happens, usually it's about 2 to 3 weeks time period. There's all these statuses that we give them. So we talked about the status stuff. And then the third thing is we give them everything in a centralized location. So back in the day, you'd send an email or you'd send them a physical copy, and it was all, Desperate all over the place. So this is now a centralized portal for anyone at that law firm or anyone at that insurance company to use, and they can just keep going back to it. So that's a cool project we're working on. It's sort of taking this sort of niche industry and like bringing it ahead to the modern age. And we really love doing stuff like that. That's fun because you can see the impact so vividly and clearly, and it does indeed actually have an impact. It's not kind of a side project. This is the core of this business.
Right. That
Uh,
is awesome. And question, so one of the things I happen to know coming into this with Vault, some of your clients are clients, fee for service, etc. Others, you play an investor role as well. Talk to me a little bit about how you kind of identify those opportunities, whether that is one of those or not. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started Vault Innovation, we were actually a venture studio to start, which is definitely different from our setup now. And what I mean by that is we were just launching our own venture, so no customers. There wasn't a service, if you will. And that's always been kind of the root of our business and who I built my team around. So kind of people that have that approach, that generalist approach, but also a very specific skill set. So kind of that T-shaped employee, I like to call them. And but you got to understand the business of what we're building. There's a lot of people that build software and they just kind of don't really get or believe in it. And that's what everything we're building, we really understand and believe. And so, yes, we sometimes will get in and kind of get married with some of our clients, if you will, not just
Yeah.
date. And so the process of valuing that, I mean, I've seen a lot of deals. I've done some, angel investing myself. I've done some investing through Vault and partnerships. Kind of the biggest thing you would think, it's like, well, is this a cool idea? That's obviously that's got to be there. So that's really not even a factor. It's really all about the people. I mean, it's like a traditional investor.
Right.
What makes a business go? It's the founding team. And, do you believe in their mindset? Do you get along with their mindset? And that's such a key thing. I mean, um, there's an old kind of way we'd say is like, we got to date before we get married. Some people go, I'll sign you up. I'll give you equity in my company a week after meeting you. And you're like, this is a pretty serious thing here. Like we're going to be at the hip for better or worse forever with this venture until something blows up or something, exits. And so it's a very serious thing. And the process is get to know the individual first as a human, but two, can you guys pull it off?
Right.
I see a lot of people that innovate or have ideas that they're, maybe arm's length away from succeeding. So they're like, I got this idea. This is a huge problem. All right, well, how are you going to get it to market? How are you going to sell it? Well, I just have to get a partnership with Netflix. And you're like, well, that's, do you know anyone at Netflix? No.
Yeah.
Have you talked to anyone at Netflix? No. You're like, well, okay. So, I mean, that's a big leap. And you're like, I don't see the reality of that happening quickly. So you want to see that scenario where people are sort of entrenched in the industry, or I'm entrenched in the industry. And that's huge. I don't want to work with a doctor that's trying to make like a social media app, or a restaurant owner that's making a tool for attorneys, right? So it's usually people that are very seasoned in the industry, and then they can go sell it.
Yeah.
And that's massive. And it's hard to evaluate that, to be honest with you.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I have done that in my lifetime, and with our team as well. And it's very interesting. The ones that had super chances for success were the ones where the people were from industry.
Yeah.
They knew the names, they knew the contacts. They just needed to have someone help them through that build, either through part of that skill set, part of that expertise. And then the other person that walks in and before you even talk about costs says, well, what if I was to give you a percentage?
Yes.
It's remember the Ali G show?
Oh yeah, LG's great.
And he's talking about airboards and surfboards and all this stuff. And like, you have this technology? He's like, well, no, that's where you come in. So yeah.
I mean, a fact that always blew my mind in this kind of entrepreneurial game is that, it's sort of considered there's the mythos, it's a young person's game.
Sure.
And I think I feel that as I've gotten older sometimes, sort of startup world or entrepreneurial land, or the resources are kind of meant to be this educational kind of younger component. But I remember reading a stat, and this was years ago, that it's like the average age of a first-time founder was like 47, like way older than I'm thinking like Zuckerberg and all these young people. And it's like, yes, there are those success stories, and there are many of them, and it's a great model. But a lot of people will, I've got this portfolio of clients, relationships, network. I've got a war chest of money that I've saved up, and I have the expertise. Now let's make my business as a seasoned pro in an industry. And they're not trying to necessarily make, a $1 billion business. They're trying to make a $50 million business.
Right.
And that's something that as I started, it was so eye-opening to me. I mean, like, why, how come I can't get a CEO for that company on the line? Like, because I haven't made any relationships. I'm 25,
Right.
And so that's something I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, you got to do it now or never. And it's like, no, it's any time is time. You just got to have the right mindset and the right thing you're going after.
Yeah, that's I could talk about that for a while, because one of the things I always take a look at too in that entrepreneurial piece is there are folks that say get started early so you can build your empire. Let's not work for others. And there's other people that will go work for someone else, build up their little nest egg. So I think entrepreneurial, I was told when I started my business, do it before you have kids, right? And that was kind of that, do it while you're young. You don't have a lot of things to risk, you don't have a lot to lose, and that sort of thing. And that is a recipe. There's also the other recipe. When you come out the other end of having a successful career, you're also the person that kind of has your stuff set up, you know? So who had more fun on the ride is what I kind of take a look at.
There's both paths can be very successful.
Yeah. That's awesome. So a couple things I want to dive into. We're sitting in TechNexus right now, and we're sitting in TechNexus, a awesome ecosystem. Can't count on my hands the amount of events that I've been here with industry related, that sort of thing. And we're also in Chicago. So you run a business in Chicago. I believe some of the folks that work for you are kind of spread out. We're post-COVID. That's kind of the way that the world works. And I would imagine not all of your clients are Chicago-based. Would love to know a little bit about, the role that either ecosystems like TechNexus or Chicago itself has had in the business you've grown, the opportunities you've had. And also, you were speaking a little bit before about building a network of community and connections.
Yeah, I mean, TechNexus has been great, and there's kind of two parts of TechNexus, and I'm not affiliated directly with them at all. I just work in the co-working space.
And I should stipulate, this isn't a TechNexus commercial. But
so I actually got the Chicago ecosystem has been tremendous. I mean, and it's evolved and it's grown so much. I mean, I do have clients all over the country. And it's a lot of kind of word of mouth we get a lot of business with. So it's just sort of your network. But it all started with Chicago for sure. I mean, feet on the ground, you meet people in person. You and I have talked about this before. You meet people at your kids' like events, and it's just crazy what you connect with people on and build relationships and see where it goes. But the Chicago ecosystem was great. I remember when 1871 opened. I remember walking in the door like the first week. And it was it was literally something that we hadn't seen before here. And I was at that time already building tech in Chicago for, 4 or 5 years. So, I'd seen a lot, and that there was just this was a totally unique thing here. And it's been just sort of growing ever since. And so I was in there as a entrepreneur. I was in there as every role you can be. And now I mentor at some of these groups now, which is interesting, kind of coming full circle on it. But tremendous help for mental help, these communities. Building a company is very stressful, and it's the little things that chip away at you. It's, I could have done this better, or how I should have done this, or I look at my peer over there that's succeeding or whatever. There's no break from the mental journey of it because it's all on you. You can't blame someone over there. You can't blame your owner or your boss because it's you.
Right.
So the community's been great for that. And I think just having like-minded owners and business owners is so helpful. And then for growing a business, it's great. I mean, saying from Chicago is massive. If I'm from the Midwest. I'm very proud of being from the Midwest. In the tech scene, you will get slights from people that talk about this. Why would you be starting your business here? Why would you be, investing here? I love it here. I think it's a great community. I think people work hard here. I think people are very smart here. And I think the community is starting to really get that second generation of higher risk money putting into it. And then it's starting to just go. So TechNexus specifically has been great. This location is in the Loop. I've met so many people here, just organically and also very directly trying to meet people. But the funny story about getting to TechNexus, I actually built an app. I had a venture kind of in the event space back when beacons were a thing.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
You can remember little beacons. And I wanted, you mentioned they do events, and I was like, I'm going to reach out to them about their events. And I was like, I just want to pilot here. And we signed a little contract to do, I think it was like 2 or 3 events. And they threw in office space here. And I was like, I already have an office, River North, whatever. And they're like, nah, it's fine, just come in. And I started coming in a few times, and I was like, this is home because of the community around it. So It's been great.
Yeah. I've been impressed with what Fred and Terry started here, and also to keep it up too, because in a way, starting a community, you've got real estate in Chicago, you've got memberships, and your clients are startups, right? I've run that business, but without the real estate piece, right? And so there's just, and the way they've been able to kind of continue and evolve, and it's I was amazed, and that was part of the reason why we moved our office over here too. Is post COVID, like the game plan just made sense, to have this space where people can interact. And what I found too is, no one wants an organization that's walking the halls, knocking on people's doors, trying to get business. It's not about that. But literally being where the community is. We've been here for a month, and I've had multiple meetings and made new connections
Yeah.
where our business can help theirs and vice versa. That's very interesting. So the question I didn't think to ask, but do you think if you were to start what you're doing in, let's say, who can we pick on? Say New York, right? New York always kind of has a thing for Chicago, right?
Yeah, there's like a little rivalry.
I came from finance, so they were very powerhouse.
Yeah.
We're just the Midwest folks.
Yeah.
Do you think there'd be anything different in outside of you having personal family connections?
That is an interesting question, actually. What's the A/B test, right? If I sort of did this in another environment, I don't think I probably fundamentally would have changed too much. I think there's zigs and zags based on relationships, but I never really thought of New York. That's never been a place. I was never tied to East Coast at all. But now San Francisco, though, a lot of ties there, family there. Two of my brothers live there, and they very much are in the tech scene there.
So that's something you probably even contemplated.
Yeah. So San Francisco, I would say, as kind of the mecca of Silicon Valley of startups. Yes, there's a lot of thought around what would have changed with that. And I think I was talking to a VC. You got to fundraise from time to time with different ventures, and he was asking me about the venture, all this stuff, and he kind of stopped and looked up, and he goes, "So Jeff, do you want to be like a Midwest founder, or do you want to be a Silicon Valley founder?" And I was like, that is a really odd question. Like I don't even know what that means. I'm telling you my business plan, right? All this. And we kind of had a whole sidebar about it, and it's like, are you just trying to make like a company? Or are you trying to make a rocket ship? Was sort of what he was implying there, which was some people could have been really offended by that, and I think some people are. I mean, I'm not. It doesn't really matter, but there is, I think, a mindset in Silicon Valley that's like you go big or go home. It's almost like a Hollywood mentality,
right?
And I think that is less here. I think people are going, I want to make a successful, profitable business. And there's not, a lot of pageantry around that.
Right.
And I think that's that quiet sort of success. And I mean, I've even talked to people, they're like, oh, that's just a lifestyle business to people. And I'm like, that's a $8 million business. That's a great lifestyle to be in. So
right.
I've done both. I've swung for the fences and the rocket ships, and I have a couple right now that are in that. And then I've got these ones that are like, I'm trying to be $1 billion business. That may have changed a little bit if I was in a different ecosystem, because I think Chicago has a little bit more grounding in that, to be honest with you. And I think in a good way, to be honest.
100%. One of the things I've heard, if you've been to Chicago Venture Summit, which has been going on, I don't know, at least over a decade now, it's something we've been involved with for a while. Point is, every year, part of the opening ceremonies and part of the opening statements, one gets into the diversity of our economy, two gets into the talent pool and all the different education, that sort of thing. The third thing is that businesses work here, in the sense that, and I don't know the stat offhand, although I guess 85% of stats verbally communicated or made up on the fly. Anyway, but there is a significant percentage of success rate with investors that are investing in startups in Chicago versus some of the moonshots that are going on in Silicon Valley and that sort of thing. And that was a big thing that was harped on back when 1871 first started up, and Chicago wanted to be called the Silicon Prairie, right? Thankfully, that kind of name kind of died. It just it doesn't have grit to it like Chicago. It almost waters us down a little bit. But that has continued to be a sounding drum in a lot of those opening ceremonies when we are talking to the different communities. And that, again, not a pitch for Chicago Venture Summit, but that's been wild too. That used to be something where you'd walk the halls, you'd bump into JB Pritzker because there's only 20 people in the halls, to now you go there and it's they've really grown that out of it too, which I think is another great thing about Chicago is there's a lot of economic development, in that case, World Business Chicago. You've got P33, you've got, I'm Chicago. There's a handful of them. Choose Chicago, right? You
Yeah.
kind of go right down the list, and the accessibility of those organizations to help kind of grow the economy, I think, is unique to Chicago too.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I mean the other side of the kind of tech, I guess, movement in Chicago is that, it's all about money. I mean, like, tech is the word, startup is a thing, but it's all about money, right? It's all
Right.
about making successful money. There's big companies that have successes here, and just people don't know them. They're kind of these,
Right.
I mean, Ocean here, it's like a massive company, huge company, and you could ask anyone, and they don't, they're just quietly making billion dollar
Yeah.
companies, so it's
The point of this podcast, by the way, what the hell is Ocean,
yeah.
right? So we'll get them in here
Yeah.
next. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, but to go back to kind of, yeah, the point of this, and to go back to kind of sharing the day to day, building software. So I've wrestled. I think you said it right on. Like, do your kids know what you do?
Yeah.
So I have 3 kids, and I think they know. I think they know what I do, right? But you're like,
Yeah.
they know that I build software. They know they build apps because they use apps. They see apps. But at the same time, they don't know at all the process of what that is, right?
Yeah.
They're just sort of like, oh, there's an app. Oh, you made that. They don't know the X's and O's of that, and a lot of people don't. But what's really cool about it is it's always changing.
Mhm.
So we go, well, what is the service? You go, well, I'm build software, and you go, well, what kind of software? Well, that changes, and so the service that kind of we provide, and it is a tricky thing. I think you have struggled with this, or not struggle. I think there's a balance of messaging here, which is we're technologists, but we're constantly using the new technology.
Right.
And so, like, a service provider that's like, hey, I'm building, 15 brand new custom apps a year, not one for 5 years. Just if you think about what makes a good business or a good product, it's iterations. And so we're just iterating on technology all the time. And, so we can hop into scenarios and move things quickly, build things better with higher odds of success. And it's hard to sort of convey that to people, right? A lot of people are like, well, you're a developer and you're a developer, you must be able to do the same thing. And it's such a wide spectrum of the service.
Yeah.
It's like going to a 5-star steakhouse and the top of the line steakhouse in Chicago, or like Denny's and getting steak. You're like, yes, that's the same menu item. It's the same like words on the menu screen, but when you get it, it's a very different thing. And that is so hard to like convey to someone.
Right.
Like, there's an experience and there's a great experience. There's an app and then there's a good app or a great app. And that's kind of the skill. And that's sort of the service. It's like, you have to be constantly churning out these new things. And it's hard. I mean, the AI boom, it's like, all right, we got to do all this, which we've been doing AI forever, but this is a different layer to it. And, the mobile boom, the beacon boom, the IoT boom, it's all changing so fast. And so we're not static at all.
Yeah. And it's also, I think it's interesting. So we're in similar lines of work, and both entrepreneurial, and that's a word that's thrown around, right? You're mentioning, yeah, everyone thinks of Zuckerberg. So that's who's sensationalized,
Yeah.
right? Just like anything. But I do think it's interesting in our line of work, really kind of feeds that yearn to keep iterating and iterating and iterating. I'm sure you do as well. Every once in a while you're working with a client, they got a good idea, like the product you were just talking about, and there's a little grass is greener moment, right? Man, it'd be nice if I just focused on this one thing and iterated that, right? But then I always kind of come back to it. I'm like, well, I kind of did that when I worked in industry, and that got boring. I was always doing other things on, not on the side necessarily, but so I think it does keep the mind entertaining, which kind of leads me to the next question. So this comes from an interesting perspective. I've got a niece right now, incredibly smart, incredibly talented, graduated from Northwestern. She went to New York for a while. She's in the theater, that sort of thing. Had a job there, decided to leave that job to come back to Chicago for lifestyle change reasons, and is now looking for places to work. And I'm like, I know all kinds of people I can introduce you. She's like, I would just like to talk to people because I know jobs like lawyer, doctor, merchant, chief, that sort of thing, but like there's all these interesting jobs out there that I've never
Sure.
even heard of, which I can relate to. My first job was in mortgage-backed securities. I had a degree in microbiology. I didn't know what that meant. I had to study principal and interest before walking in there. So with that being said, talking about the type of people that you attract, what would you attract? What is the persona of someone that would enjoy working at Vault, and who wouldn't enjoy working at Vault?
Yeah, I no, that's a good question. I think it is so priceless for your niece to talk to people because the jobs that you're taught about in school don't even like exist or they don't even teach it. I mean, I remember coming out of school. I didn't learn software in undergrad. I had a mechanical engineering background, and I didn't even understand like how a website was made. And so it's awesome to get exposed to things. Yeah, at Vault, I mean the persona that works best for us is definitely a generalist. So someone that can do a lot of things.
Mhm.
Even though we hire specialized roles, we have 15 people on our team, so it's a small company. All remote, all U.S. team, but really what we're looking for is like autonomous people. So you have to, you're not marching to every single, you're not being micromanaged at all. You're very much, manage your time, do what you want to do. So you have to kind of understand the value of your time and understand the value of what you're doing.
Huge.
Yes. And so I have built companies where you are like, hey, I'm, maybe younger people or even just people that like are, hey, this is what you're doing today, and keep them on this very specific task. I'm looking for people who have a little bit more creative mindset around problem solving. So it's really interesting. Like you put up a job post for like here is the job requirements, and that's fine, that's great, and you'll get resumes or whatever, and like you'll like, okay, that's fine. Right within like 10 minutes of talking to them, are they going to be able to solve something on their own? And I would just say a perfect example of that is half of what you need to do to solve something is you want to solve it.
Yeah.
And it can be hard, or you might make a mistake, or you might come up with the wrong solution. And the people that are solving things have many of those. Like, all right, here's my solution. Oh, that didn't work. The client did not like that, or that campaign was a failure, or whatever it was, or that product was awful. Kill that startup. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is people that are asking why about what's going on. So if I go, hey, I want you to add this feature to this app, if they're just like, okay, I mean, do you want it to be blue, or do you want it to be this? And it's like, all right, right away, you're like, that's not going to be the best team for us.
Yeah.
You need to go, well, what, like, so what is this going to do? What's the impact of building this feature?
Right.
Well, this is supposed to move this metric, and this is supposed to make this customer make more money by this. And then they're like, okay, that makes sense. Now I'll build you the best version of that.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing for us is if you're going to come into our team as a designer, you got to like understand a little bit of how business works and how customer, success is. And you've got to understand how, technology works a little bit. So a generalist. So I've found, I have hired, I'm not a huge percentage. I would say maybe like 20% of people for a role, and then they've gone to another role.
They switched roles within the organization.
Yeah, and it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it wasn't, but it like they started, leaning in, and it was like, I'm seeing your appetite, I'm seeing your signals. Let's swing you over here, and it's been great. When I went into tech as a designer, I was solid. I was applying for jobs, so this was not my own company. And I looked kind of high and low, applied for jobs, and I got offered a job at sort of a bigger agency. And I was applying for designer, and they're like, I think you'd be better project manager. Like they could tell I was a generalist. And I said, no, that's cool. I think you probably will end up that way. But like, I need to saw my teeth on this skill set. Like I'm going to master this skill set for, 3-5 years, whatever. It's like, that's a milestone I'm going to reach as my career. And I'll always have that. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to be a PM, am I going to design? And they're like, well, yeah, there was this like, well, yeah. And I'm like, no, I mean, I want to be like involved in designing it, not like managing the designer, but like designing it. And long story short, I turned that down to go work at a small group, about 6-7 people. And I was like, I'm going to be like a fox in the henhouse. I'm going to be able to do whatever makes sense to me. And that was exciting to me as an employee. I turned down corporate jobs, big jobs, because I was like, I'm not a specialist. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that people need to understand, because, small company has risks, but you have freedom. And I was such a big value to me. And, that's sort of passed down to my team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, another story I can relate to, but won't spend too much time. But when I got started in banking, I was in a group that was very innovative and unique, and got to do a lot of the same things, like designing on my Mac on the side and that sort of stuff, and like helping out with some of their technology, and that kind of grew into what I do today out of a banking job. It's kind of funny. So, but I think that's the luck of who's running the show, which in the case of
Yeah.
Vault folks, it's you. So good for them. You have that insight.
Yeah. So, I mean, if she's looking to hone, your niece or whatever, she's looking to hone a skill set. I've seen people very tactical. They're like, I'm taking this job because I want to master X.
Mhm.
I'm taking this, and it's very transactional. Like, they're using the company,
Right. To
and
learn.
and that was early. A good buddy of mine kind of had that in mind. I was like, God, that's so interesting. A lot of people are like, well, I'm looking for a job, I want to get paid. My career is in that field, so I want to get in that field. But they're also, you go down one level granular, like, no, I want to learn this skill. They're going to be the best for me to learn that skill. Like, it's almost like getting an education. You go, I want to go to this university, it's a good university. Or you're like, no, I want to meet the professor of my specific thing I want to teach. And I see who he is or whatever is very different than like the logo of the school. So
Yeah.
Like you said, it's about the human inside of there. So yeah.
That's very cool. So, okay. So we talked about Chicago. We talked about TechNext. Talked about general problems you solve. A couple examples. Talked about the type of people that like working at Vault. A couple questions I always like asking when I'm kicking something off with a client. So let's see how it works here. But what keeps you up at night?
Ooh, I mean, that's I'm there's
That's not too revealing for a podcast.
the generic thing is, I mean, um you're the bottom, it always comes down to the bottom line. I mean, there's nuances and granular things, but a generic bottom line is, I'm responsible for 15 people eating and putting the food on the table. So it's always the revenue and the profit and revenue. And so that is sometimes very distant, and sometimes it's very close, depending on the ebbs and flows of any business. But even when things are high, what keeps you up the most. And that's granular. That pulls out of what? It pulls out of, man, I hope I win this project. So if there could be a big pitch, right? A big sales opportunity, that I can get stressed about that. Someone on the team that you're trying to win over to recruit, you're like, oh my God, I really got to get this guy. I'll get worried about that. I want this person or that girl, that woman, that man. And, I'll stress about that. It's like, this could change the trajectory of this startup or my company now. So, but that all comes down to the bottom line, which is the finance. I think my first company, I talked about the startup that I worked with my brother. We didn't really have a concept of that. It was not that, it wasn't as stressful. I mean, we had to make a living and like pay rent, but it was like us, like the risk was like, okay, well, we'll just quit this and get a job someday. And now you're like, oh, I have a whole team, and once you get that to that level, I would say, that's the thing that will keep me up more than anything. And, it's not every day or anything, but there are moments where you're like, if it is, it's that. It's always that.
Yeah, that's good and expected responses.
Yeah, I would say probably not earth shattering.
Everyone in the services industry, I think that is
yes.
the big thing, because it can shift, it can change, and you've got that level of responsibility on it too. Yeah, I remember back when we first started, we would pay ourselves when we remembered to,
Yes.
And then you go through that phase of bringing on the first people we brought on were different skill sets than what we had. But then the first time you start hiring people that do the thing that you were doing, and you go through that evaluation of, I could just do this myself.
Yeah.
But, and the trick is hire someone that's better than you, which is what we did in our case.
100%. 100% on that.
Cool. Another question that I like asking, particularly entrepreneurial business owners, is if someone was to give you, let's call it $10 million to spend on your company, what would you do with it?
Well, let's sign the deal. Give me the 10 million. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
No, I would say, I mean, I've got this dichotomy to me. Again, I'm a service provider with Vault. And then I do have that venture side. So that's actually, there's probably kind of a different nuance to that, but I'll kind of answer it two ways. With Vault, the number one thing that I would do, is I would focus on, kind of recruiting a more well-rounded kind of 360 team with redundancy. So like with 15 people, we're covered on all the buckets, but I would want more coverage on buckets so that, again, just going back to the philosophy of building out software, the analogy of like scoring a touchdown in football is like, if you're on your own 1 yard line, you don't want to have one play to get a touchdown. A 99-yard play is like, okay, that's not going to work. You got to get 3 yards, 5 yards, a first down, and like keep going down the field. So I would want to build out an infrastructure of a team that has complete redundancy around all the skill sets: design, development, product strategy, and QA, and then go to market. So like sales and marketing, and just go boom. There's these units, and then from there, I would basically invest in these teams to, there could be clients providing service, but I would have a team that's just R&D, on the latest tech, building products, basically like a venture studio would be, but related to like a client service. So, venture studios can be like you build it all yourself. Like these are my ideas. I've done that. It's hard. You've got to really understand an industry to really impact an industry. And if I'm like reading headlines and be like, oh my God, there's an opportunity in the automobile industry, if I'm reading that in like the front page news, you're already, I don't want to say behind, but like there's already 15 other people, if not 100 people doing it. So it's finding those niches. So I would say basically building an R&D department, around building awesome products and software, but have it sort of a client-oriented version of it. So not me just building my own ventures, but my clients. I mean, we ideate, same with you. I mean, you're ideating on like, well, what if you did this or what if you did that? But yeah, let's do it. But it would be a creative business model where we would do it with them and then create a whole new revenue stream together. That would be the vision.
I love it.
Yeah.
So when I asked that in a client, with both those questions, I asked in a client setting. So, and I should have thought ahead. Asking an entrepreneur, I could have guessed the answer and keep you up at night. Typically, when I'm asking someone that I'm working with,
Yeah.
I learn what's really going on.
Yeah, like the day to day.
Yeah. But then on the $1 million question, I'm usually talking to someone that doesn't have control of that much of budget, even if they did. And then the follow up is, well, how would you do that with $100? Right. And what's interesting is a lot of times that then can turn into people starting taking steps towards some of those things. So it's interesting. It's kind of the release valve. And
no, those are great questions. And I think we talked about this a couple times.
You can take them.
Yeah. My lens is, I don't want to say conflicted, but like I have a lot of lenses around every sort of problem, right? There's not like one way I look at things because I've been on all sides of it. I've hired other people to do things for me. I've had my own teams do things for me. I have a service that does things for people. So it's like you can kind of see it from all the angles. So some of these questions, I can like splice out into multiple answers. But no, I totally hear you on that. Was probably a little bit of a sidestep of what you maybe were getting to.
Yeah, 100%. Well, cool. What if we were to say, so I think I've got a good understanding of your business model, the type of people, the types of problems you're solving. Also, I guess, know a lot about the space, but I think I've got a round understanding of the role that Vault plays, and the work you do. If I was to say, what makes Vault unique, either culturally or delivery model? I'm sure you've been asked this before in a pitch, and you're like, oh, this question again. But what would you say is something you believe is different in Vault as a business compared to another service agency that's building technology for clients?
Yeah, and 100%. I mean, there's a lot of software developers out there. There's a lot of agencies, and yes, you get this a lot. Someone kind of gave the analogy. It's like you're just a local pizza place on the corner.
Yeah.
You're not Domino's, you're not Papa John's or whatever. And I was like, no, I mean, I guess that's fair. And a lot of people go, well, what's your secret sauce? Because you only have the one pizza place. I mean, and the answer is, well, what makes that pizza place unique? It's their recipe, it's their team, it's their ambiance. So I mean, I think the biggest thing that a service like us provides, it is our team.
Yeah.
And my experience obviously is the start of that, but also the people that I'm hiring. I mean, I've had people at Vault for 7-8 years that we've just built and seen so much. But also, I would say that the next thing is really, it's not like my version of our service is not about really making the most money from you. And this, I mean, other agencies have this. It's doing what's best for your company. So again, that's kind of that entrepreneurial mindset.
Yep.
And I think that really is what drives most of our business is people recognize that we're not selling them anything. We're trying to help their business. And I think that's something you and I similarly share. But there are companies out there that do this, and they're just like, I'm literally looking for a pound of flesh. You want to build that thing, I'm going to go build it. Probably doesn't make sense, but you're going to pay me a lot to do it. Or it might make sense, but I don't really care. And I think that comes through, and that's part of the longevity of us, why we've been around, 10 years and counting. And what keeps us going is that it's that trust. I mean, I bring in basically all the business of Vault right now, or have, and I still to this day kind of go like, am I selling? And it's like, yes, you are, but I don't even really feel that way. It's like, tell me what's up. Like you said, figure out what's going on. Hey, here's something to do. Or you ask me to build this thing and I'll go, you should do that.
Yeah.
At the risk of, I have money, I want you to build this. I've literally had people go, you are the first person to tell me that I shouldn't build this. That's such great advice. You're right. You bring up all these good points. Literally 10 minutes later, they go, so can I hire you to build this?
Right.
And it's like, I appreciate, I'm flattered that you trust me to do that. But did you hear what I just said? I said, don't do that. So yeah, I think that's what makes us unique. It's the people, and it's the approach of, we're here to make your business grow. It's not about selling.
Awesome. Jeff, this is an awesome conversation about the business. I feel like I learned a lot about Vault. Where, if people wanted to kind of follow up and see the projects you're working on, or what's the best way to keep track of you? Is it your website, or is your social? Where are you guys making your noise?
Yeah. I mean, obviously go to the website, vaultinnovation.com. You can always find stuff going on there. We're on all the socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, probably or X is our probably most common ones. But yeah, we like to give kind of insights of what we're building. So if you want to see what we're building, all the cool stuff we're doing, yeah, check us out. It's always changing, and it's always moving quick.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yep. See you around the hallways.
Yep.